I don't think it's a good idea to get attached to anything temporary. And like I said, happiness is a temporary state. It comes and goes multiple times throughout your life, yeah? But what has more value than happiness? It's the truth. The truth is not based on any temporary state. Even the truth sometimes can be temporary, like for example, it's cold. Well, that sort of truth applies only if it actually is cold. Or Johnny is 4 feet tall, which might be the case when Johnny is a kid, but he will probably grow. In that case, we're talking about temporary truths. But then there is a higher form of truth, which is independent of the temporary. And above that, there's even higher truth than that, which is true under any circumstance in any possible universe. Like, for example, if you have an object A and object B, then either object A will be bigger than object B, or object B will be bigger than object A, or they will always be the same size. Now you have a sort of universal truth. Me being a man is perhaps not a universal truth, but it is a truth that is relevant for as long as I'm alive. That is truth that I cannot change. So, what is more fulfilling? Living in a sort of happy lie, that is sort of like a high induced by drugs, or living a fulfilled life by accepting myself. And I don't know about you, but to me option B sounds much more reasonable, because truth triumphs temporary happiness, and living in accordance with that truth can lead to something with a much higher value than temporary happiness. Aristotle was he wrote down about a term called eudaimonia, which sometimes gets translated as happiness, but in reality it's much more than that. It is a sort of the fulfillment. It's living to your higher purpose by exercising your reason. And like I said before, I think if you live a fulfilling, meaningful life, that will automatically also make you happy in the process. So don't chase at happiness by itself, and you will see that will help you deal with any sort of situation. What I found out helped me a lot in the process was first of all, being out in the nature, feeling as one with the world around me, and as a human, which is a creature of reason, you could say, at least some of us. It's so easy to feel that we are something separate from the natural world around us. We view culture and technology as something separate from the nature, whereas it's all really a part of it. We are a part of it. I ended up engaging in meditation. For a while, I started meditating several times a week. One thing you may struggle with after you detransition is your sense of self. The great question of, well, who am I really? And after you found yourself making such a horrible mistake, you might think, well, how can I ever trust myself? Or how can I ever trust my judgment? I'm not a very emotional person. And what I mean by that is that I am a sensitive person, but I am not an emotional person. And there is a huge difference, because an emotional person is a person who thinks with their feelings or bases their decision making on their feelings, and that is not me. I do know it very well that you should never use your feelings when it comes to decision making. But then again, can you trust your reasonable judgment as well? When I first decided that I wanted to be a woman, that was a decision I reasonably justified for myself. So if I can't trust that, well, what can I trust? This led me to developing even more interest in philosophy of mind. I started stripping away all the cultural aspects that seemingly made me who I am, at least on the surface. Eventually, to the point where I became culturally homeless. But even then, I realized that there are temporary chemical states that affect my mind and affect my thinking as well as my desires. And on top of that, there are personality traits that act as a catalyst of sorts, a predisposition for the way I act and think and feel. But what if there's a deeper me underneath all that? So I was contemplating a lot. I was meditating and spending more time in nature. And the conclusion I arrived at is that I am a spiritual animal, nothing more and nothing less. I am a spiritual animal observing the world around me, the patterns that emerged, guided by natural laws that steer the whole universe just as much as they steer you or me. I am a spiritual animal longing for the divine. I guess you could call what I've went through sort of a ego death. And when I emerged from that, what I realized that I didn't necessarily exist as a subject, but more of as a part of a whole, the bigger picture. Because in modern society doesn't seem to be preoccupied with this sort of contemplation. It promotes an individual that is obsessed with the self rather than letting go of that self. It creates an individual that is based in hedonism, who will rather pursue simple temporary pleasures rather than live in accordance with the truth. And I think letting go of the ego is a necessary part of healing, but also a necessary part of growing. And if I didn't go through that, I would probably be where I started. But it certainly helped me with my depression. And that is not to say that I never feel any symptoms of depression ever, because it always comes back in one form or another. But the change that happened is that now I'm equipped to deal with that. So in the process I became a much better functioning member of society.